You made a statement earlier about your interview with Lester Carr that he was unable to explain to you the program in which the aircraft were being maintained?
That is correct.
Okay. Specifically, what do you recall him telling you?
Inspector Bates then asked Mr. Lester Carr about the maintenance schedule relative to the fleet. He stated that all the aircraft were on the manufacturer's programs.
Okay, so there was a maintenance program that he referred to.
That's what he was saying. We could not find any proof that the FSDO had approved that program.
Okay. But you didn't speak to the FSDO?
Oh, no. Oh, no.
What specifically is the basis for your opinion with regard to the Director of Maintenance?
Questions that was asked of Mr. Lester Carr by both Inspector Bates and myself. Mr. Lester Carr was unable to answer many of those questions and referred us to Mr. Wayne Carr.
Do you know that Wayne Carr was a former Director of Maintenance for
Yes.
AirTrek?
Yes.
Is it required by the regulations that the Director of Maintenance himself actually perform all the paperwork, or can he delegate that responsibility?
They could delegate.
So, knowing that fact, do you still feel it was odd that Lester Carr, the current Director of Maintenance, would defer the paperwork responsibility to the former Director of Maintenance?
It was unusual, just based on my experience. And
it's your opinion that based on his record-keeping delegation, that he doesn't qualify in the Part 119?
I have worked with many directors of maintenance with many different 135 operators as a principal inspector, and I have seen very sharp individuals and not so sharp individuals in those positions. So,
are you suggesting that he's not sharp enough, in your terms, to be the Director of Maintenance for AirTrek?
I don't know.
Listen to my question. It's very specific with regard to the 4 airworthiness directives that are listed in the emergency order of revocation. Did you specifically ask Lester Carr to show you through documentation how AirTrek complied with those 4 specific airworthiness directives?
I did not. I did not.
Do you know if Inspector Bates did?
I do not know that either. I don't know if Inspector Bates asked that question.
If you look at Section B, 91.417B, says the owner or operator shall retain the following records until the work is repeated or superseded by other work. Is that an accurate statement?
Oh, absolutely.
So if an airworthiness directive were performed by AirTrek on one of its aircraft, and it was a recurring airworthiness directive, once the airworthiness directive was complied with, the previous record of compliance can be taken out of the records, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So if a record is not required to be kept by 91.417, then the owner or operator is not required to make those maintenance records available for inspection to the administrator, right?
According to the regulations, that's what they're saying. That's what they're saying.
What did that mean?
That means that Lester Carr told us that Wayne is keeping the historical records. He used the words legacy. So, and basically what that means is historical.
And they don't need to be provided to the administrator.
According to the rule, that's what it says.
Did you ever ask for legacy records that were not required to be shown to the administrator during your investigation?
Did not ask for legacy records, only all records for the aircraft. That meant all-inclusive. That's everything.
And what authority do you have to demand the production of records not required to be retained by the regulation?
I was not demanding. Matter of fact, couldn't have been nicer to Mr. Carr. So
what authority?
It was a request. I was not demanding. Couldn't have been nicer. It was a request.
Are you holding AirTrek responsible for not providing you with records that were not required to be retained by regulation?
There was a lack of records to make a determination of the airworthiness status of the aircraft.
With regard to what?
To basically those 4 airworthiness directives that Inspector Bates and I had reviewed.
And now turn to the next page, the second page of Deposition Exhibit 44.
Okay.
Tell me what you see there.
Objection. Deposition Exhibit 44 were not provided to the administrator despite requests to do so.
To provide records that are not required to be kept in accordance with the regulations. Just so we have it
The
straight.
FAA did.
Did you make that request as counsel for the administrator during discovery for records that are not required to be retained in accordance with the regulation? Because I want to get that straight on the record.
I don't. What I'm saying is that the FAA.
Yes or no? Did you?
Let me make my statement. These are not the records that were provided to the FAA at the time of the inspection.
Mischaracterization of counsel's description of the records. They were not requested at any time by counsel for the administrator, nor could they be requested by during the inspection, as they are records that are not required to be retained in accordance with 91.417 of the regulations. So you were put on notice that he was only showing you those records required under the regulation.
Yes.
Is that all AirTrek is required to comply with? Is the minimum FAA requirements?
It would speak to minimum requirements. The rules would, so for an operator to meet, so yes.
And would they be required under the regulation to make copies of those records if the records were not required to be kept in accordance with 91.417 of the regulation?
Under 91.417, no, but perhaps a reasonable person would. No, but perhaps a reasonable person would.
So are you recommending revocation because you feel that they were not reasonable?
No, I'm just saying that there was a lack of documentation that we could not make a determination.
Can't
Can't
run an aviation business legally. Too many opinions.
Right. Mr. Waincar told both Inspector Bates and I, he made a statement that you can't run an aviation business legally. He says there's too many opinions, and he was referring to the FAA.
Do you know what Mr. Carr may have meant, Mr. Waincar may have meant, when he said there were too many opinions at the FAA?
I believe it's because different FAA inspectors might have different ways to approach things, so one inspector may not be consistent with another inspector.
Have you found that to be true in your history with the FAA?
There have been inspectors that I have dealt with that have not followed, I would say, the national guidance from the FAA. There have been inspectors that I have dealt with that have not followed, I would say, the national guidance from the FAA.
In fact, the Tampa Flight Standards District Office, the certificating office for AirTrek, found no violation history in almost 30 years of operation, right?
That, sir, I do not know.
But yet your team found enough violation history, apparently, to issue an emergency order of revocation, right?
Yes, sir.